And the House is showing just how rambunctious it can be, waiting until the very last minute last night to vote on just a one-week extension to keep the Department of Homeland Security open. Here to talk more about this, we have Crystal Ball. She's a co-host of MSNBC's The Cycle. Adolfo Franco, Republican strategist and former advisor to Senator John McCain when he ran for president. And Evan McMorris-Santoro, he's the White House reporter for BuzzFeed. So, not sure where to start here, but I'll try this one on for starters. Mo Brooks, the Republican from Alabama who joined us in the last segment, Adolfo, surprised me. Because what we keep hearing is John Boehner is not going to put this clean funding bill on the floor, full year of funding for DHS. He's scared of a conservative revolt. And here's one of those conservatives who voted no on the one-week extension last night saying, you know what, I think he should put the Senate bill on the floor.
Yeah, that's a little bit unusual, and I think he's in this distinct minority. But if we can push the rewind button here for a moment, I'd like to take the Speaker's position here for a moment. I think, you know, for the last few years, the Democrats have been clamoring about regular order, and regular order in Washington speaks just really means let the majority vote their will. You referred to it, Steve, with the immigration bill, for example. They complained that the House did not take up the Senate-passed immigration bill a couple of years ago. I think the Republican plan here, which was in a sense always teed up for disaster, was let's pass this bill with the provisions on the executive order in the House and let the Senate vote on it, have the president veto the bill, and have Democrats go on the record, a significant number, probably 8 or 9 in the Senate, and a good number even in the House, and embarrass the president.
So that was the game. That was the filibuster.
Well, well, remember the president was just on NBC and on Telemundo with Jose Diaz-Balart, where he said this filibustering just has to stop. Well, this is a case in point. Let the regular order move forward. Let the House work its will. Let the Senate work its will. Obviously, there are the numbers there to sustain the president's veto. And then I think a compromise could have been had. That was the Republican plan. But somebody should have told them this was probably not in the cards. They weren't going to let the. They turned it into a Republican issue correctly, as I would if I were a Democrat.
Well, that's kind of amazing, Evan, right? Because the Republicans finally got legislatively what they'd been looking for after the last election. They got the House, bigger majority than they've had, and they finally got the Senate. And so, but of course, Republicans should know from the last 6 years, even if you don't have the Senate, you can filibuster and basically grind the place to a halt. Are they really surprised at how this is played out?
No, I don't think they're surprised at all. This is why I love that clip you played earlier of Boehner. I love these sort of like lessons, like story time with John Boehner, where he sort of explains how the House works, but with this very face, like, don't you understand over here? It's crazy. I can't do anything to stop this stuff. Huh? Yeah, different body temperature. That's like, you know, that's Boehner speak for very angry Boehner. But yeah, no, I think the Republicans back themselves into a huge corner here, and this is a huge problem for them. I mean, there's no upside at all to shutting down the DHS. I think that they think that, you know, that they have some districts where it's so conservative in the gerrymandered districts that it appears to be the thing to do. But you know, everywhere in America, this is going to be terrible news for them, and they're just kind of up against this wall, and they don't know what they're going to do. And I think that they should have seen this coming. This has happened to them several times now, that they have done things like this and fell into the trap again.
Here's the thing that I wonder, though, sort of the psychology of the Republican members of the House who would you know, be against this, who would do this. They shut down the government in 2013. They caught hell for it. The polls said, oh my God, we blame you, you're terrible. In 2014, they had a banner year. Didn't hurt him. Right.
Well, that's exactly it, right? So they feel vindicated in a certain sense. I mean, the American people either forgot or the people who cared about that didn't show up, so it didn't matter. They had a banner year, elected the largest majority like ever in history, right? So they're feeling like their strategy has been vindicated. And let's be clear here. These individuals who are voting against funding the DHS, they don't care about the Republican Party. They don't care about the national Republicans. They care about themselves, right? They care about themselves. They care about their own district. They care about their own political interests. I mean, to a certain extent, that's true of all these politicians.
Democrats,
but that's the calculus. Calculus that they're doing.
Humanity.
But you know, let's not pretend like they have like these altruistic impulses towards the country or their own party. They're looking out for themselves. Now, I think this whole thing from the very beginning was so ludicrous. I could never understand what they thought the end game was going to be here. It was always going to end in disaster. Well, there was no other way this could go down.
Adolfo, the end game still is that whether this is in a day or a week, DHS is going to get full funding with no strings attached, right?
Well, yes, in all likelihood, but there was an end game. I know it's easy to be the Monday morning quarterback. By the way, I think Democrats are also voting their own interests, not just a national agenda or so forth.
I'm going to just say
but let me tell you this, Steve. Here was the end game. maybe a miscalculation, was all the polling data demonstrated that the executive decrees or the executive orders were unpopular. There was a lot of concern about the president taking these unilateral actions regarding immigration broadly. So I think the thinking was, in terms of my conversations, was there was enough movement at the national level. I don't think it's not the #1 issue in the United States, but that there would be enough pressure on the president to actually have to at least accept the vote in the Senate.
What did the polling say was the popularity of the Department of Homeland Security while ISIS is beheading people and gaining territory
I agree,
people
but
in
remember,
Brooklyn being arrested for terrorism? I mean, it's just absurd that they ever thought this was a good idea.
Back to the regular order, I was referring to the fact I think there'd be pressure to have an up and down vote because there are a significant number of Democrats that are against the executive order, with the president vetoing and eventually getting a clean bill.
You're saying that the calculation then was Republicans were confident there'd be a vote in the Senate.
And
they didn't get the vote.
Exactly.
So how does this end, Evan?
Well, I don't know how it ends. I think one way that it ends. Well, I think we're going to have a Department of Homeland Security that's funded. I think there's no way that these Republicans are going to let that not happen. But I will say, some of the damage is already done. I spoke with a very senior DHS official last week. I just called the person up and said, how you doing? Morale is so low in that department already. People are already looking to send out their resumes. People are already looking to sort of look outside. They feel sort of like this is a department where they're there to protect people and do good for people, and they feel like the people who are trying to fund them and the people that they work for are turning on them. Well, so to a certain extent, the damage is already done here. You don't want to have a DHS people who are not fired up and want to do a good job at work.
But it's not about them, and they know it's not
about them. Though.
Of course it's about them.
It's their job and their paycheck. It's about them.
It's about the president's illegal action, in my judgment. That's what it's about. I think we've been clear about it. They've been the victim of it, but largely self-funded, and most of these individuals would have reported to work, and they would be paid back anyway. Well, it's not an attack. You know, it's not an attack on them. It's an attack on the president.
I think that's hard for them to realize this. I think that's a hard image for them to see. When you look at this thing, I mean, these guys, this is not even like a department that people think and make jokes about. This is a frontline department on this.
Republicans like this department.
In the continuing fight against terrorism.
The government's been shut down before. This department, the Department of Defense.
True,
the difference is this department is actually self-funded. But to Crystal's point is, quite honestly, I was told a year ago on one of these programs that the Republicans would pay a huge price for the government shutdown in November. We have the largest majorities in 80 years in the House and picked up 9 Senate seats.
That's partly because Obama screwed up so bad with Obamacare.
I'll make you a little wager. We're back on this program in 16. This won't be an issue.
Well, I will say a lot more people will be going to the polls in 2016 than went in 2014.
Okay, well, I do think that's an important point, because I remember at the height of the government shutdown, there was talk, hey, this is how the Democrats are going to take back the House.
Something happened, though. Obamacare went down. I mean, if that hadn't happened, who knows what would happen with the government?
But it's true. Everybody looks at the bottom line.
People were in November were voting on the government shutdown? Oh, come on.
Well, they were.
We will pick this up later in the show, later in the weekend, later in the week, in 2016. Anyway, still ahead. The final day of CPAC. The other big story this weekend, how's Jeb Bush looking ahead of today's big straw poll? Going to go live to the CPAC floor. That's coming up. Also, LeBron James is frustrated with some new attention on his family. We're going to have that story for you.